Welcome to another episode of Behind the Game, the show that pulls back the curtain on the world of sports and introduces you to the people who bring the games that we love so much to life. I'm Patrick Klinger. To my left is my co-host, the always handsome and debonair Bill Robertson, Commissioner of the Western Collegiate Hockey Association.
Thanks, Patrick, and good afternoon, everyone. And our guest today is Mr. Kevin Warren, who is the Chief Operating Officer of the Minnesota Vikings, and they have a brand new facility just down the road from our studios here in Eagan. And first of all, Kevin, we want to welcome you to this show.
Yeah, it's good to be here. It really is good to be home. Eagan feels like home now, so I'm glad we're so close and to be able to spend some time with you all today.
Well, we know you have a really busy schedule, so we really appreciate your valuable time. I think, first of all, for the viewers out there, I think they'd love to know, as the Chief Operating Officer of an NFL team, what do you do exactly in that role?
I think the biggest thing to get across is that there are so many multiple departments that we have. Oftentimes people view football as a game, which it is, but when you think about it, not only the actual game itself, it's only 13 minutes of action during each game, but so our business is year-round, and so all the way from I'm responsible for the business side of the operation. Rick Spillman and Coach Zimmer are responsible for the football operations, and then we report to our president and owner, Mark Wilf. But the departments that I work with and the people that I work with, which by the way are I think the best executives in the league, but all the way from the ticket sales, the ticket operations, to branding, to sales, to marketing, to finance, to legal, all of those different areas, our charitable foundation, all those areas that have from a business standpoint, operation standpoint, are ultimately my responsibility. So as we joke internally, we're the department that creates the revenue, and then we send it downstairs to the football operations so they can spend the revenue on great players.
The Vikings had a terrific season in 2017. You went to the NFC Championship game, and then you had the Super Bowl right on the heels of that. Tell us a little bit about what that experience was like. Yeah,
I mean, it was, again, one of the things, and it starts with our ownership group, the Wolf family, they handle their business in a classy, elegant way. They support us. They support our ideas, and we support their vision. They give us the resources to be the best possible sports franchise in the world. And so along those lines with the Super Bowl, some people fail to realize that we were working on that throughout the year while we were working on our normal duties and playing games and getting prepared. But we feel a fiduciary responsibility as stewards of a great franchise to host a Super Bowl. And as I had to remind our staff after our tough loss against the Eagles, was the fact that when we put in for our bid a couple years ago and were approved to bring the Super Bowl here, it did not have a disclaimer on there that said that you can host it if you're in the game. And so I just had to remind people that we're Minnesotans. We always stand tall. We always stand proud. We look out for the best interests of others, and that we needed to keep that in mind, and we need to put on the best Super Bowl in the history of the Super Bowls. And I will say that the letters and phone calls and thank you notes that we've received from people in the NFL, from the NFL office, from the other teams, to fans, that the Super Bowl that we hosted here in the Twin Cities was voted at the top.
Tell us a little bit. You have a fascinating story before we get into more football talk and about your new practice facility, but your personal story, your journey to this position where you're at with the Vikings. I think it would be important for our viewers to hear a little bit about that.
Yeah, I mean, it has been a journey, and I have to remind people all the time. Just someone yesterday called me who was going through some tough times, and I had to remind them that if you look at the history of the word testimony, it requires a test. And I said, if you don't have a test, then all you have is a money, and I don't know what a money is, and I don't want one. So I've been very fortunate, and I say this from the bottom of my heart, is that at a very young age that I had to go through a lot of issues, as a kid, and one primarily that you're probably referring to is I was hit by a car riding my bike as a young kid, 11, 12 years old, and was fortunate to live. And had a devastating leg injury, broke my femur, which is the largest bone in your body. So I learned more about bones and growth as more than I wanted to. But I was in traction for an extended period of time in the hospital, and then I was in a body cast for multiple months. And that's a time period, a really tough time for a young person. You're growing, your body's growing, you're going through puberty, all of these different issues. And especially being in Phoenix, Arizona, where the weather's nice and your friends are playing outside, and this is pre all the technology and the great devices we have now. There's no cell phone. You had 5 channels on your TV if you were lucky, and there was no cable, and there was no Netflix, and all those different things. But I say that, and I'd say this sincerely, that's really where my life began, because there's so many people that by the time they face tragedy or a tough time in their life, they really have never developed coping skills to understand how to get through that. And so it was during that period of time, that year, where I'm a big believer that but for that accident, I wouldn't be sitting here today. That it really taught me to appreciate every single day. So no matter what I'm going through, personally or professionally, you'll never hear me complain or never say I had a bad day, because laying in that bed and just really praying to God to give me another opportunity. And oftentimes, I think back to myself, is that I went through months of eating and drinking laying on my back. I mean, when you're in a body cast, it was flat, and I couldn't sit up. And if you ever want to have fun, you should try to eat a meal and drink something laying flat on your back. So when people say they've been flat on their back, I truly have been. And so it was during that period that I set the tone that if I was blessed with my health and strength to get up out of the bed and be able to go forward, I was going to do the best job I possibly could as a student. I was going to be the best student athlete, because doctors told me that I probably would have difficulty, if at all, walking again. For sure, sports, was kind of going to be a pipe dream, but I would give it the best that I possibly could. And so when I got out, I had the meeting with the doctor, and I'm working on a book on this now, and asked him what would be the best thing to do to help me to recover, and he said swim. And so I received about a $30,000 settlement, and actually went to my parents because I asked them to put a swimming pool in our yard, and they didn't have the resources to do it. So I went and took more than a third of my settlement to actually pay for the pool that my parents agreed to put in our backyard. And then I swam back. And so the whole theme of my life is, you got to build your own pool. And so many of us have great ideas and great talent, but we may not be willing to build your pool. So that's when I learned the essence of building my own pool. And it was during that journey, not only the physical recovery, but just probably the mental toughness and the determination and the grit and the compassion for people, and the appreciation for life. Every single day is a blessing that has led me to where I sit here today.
I've had the good fortune of hearing that story, and it really is a fascinating one. So from that point, then you went to Grand Canyon.
So from that point, I got up, finished high school, and then I was a recruited student athlete 6 years later from my accident, and I ended up going to the University of Pennsylvania in the Ivy League. And it was interesting, because then you talk about Grand Canyon. Grand Canyon recruited me out of high school, but I really overlooked them. And that's another lesson that has come full circle, that sometimes your biggest blessing is 30 miles. The Grand Canyon is about 30 miles from the house I was raised in, 30 miles. So I had to go 3,500 miles to come back to end up 30 miles from my house. And that was really a circuitous journey. And some days I would think that, boy, that was probably, I shouldn't have done that, a waste of time. But no, it's just the opposite. That it really, because it taught me a lesson. So many times we look over the horizon, and it really is right there. And so got a chance to come back and stayed healthy, and was blessed with a career that I'm proud of at Grand Canyon, not only academically but athletically.
And how did you find yourself in Minnesota eventually? So
I go back to Grand Canyon. I graduate from college. I knew I was going to go on to grad school, and got admitted to the MBA JD program at Arizona State. They had a unique program back in the 80s. And then I had one of my older sisters became ill, and she was living in South Bend, Indiana. And so I went to the dean at Arizona State and asked him if he would let me speed up my MBA, which they did. I took extra courses and summer school, and was able to finish my MBA in warp speed. And then I pled with the dean at the University of Notre Dame to go to school to care for my sister. So I lived in their basement and took care of their 2 young kids. And it was interesting. I had a really emotional experience. I actually will see him here in about 2 weeks. But the dean, David Link, his son is a lawyer at Cargill. And I spoke at Cargill a couple years ago and told the story about how a man, David Link, changed my life for admitting me to Notre Dame and to care for my sister. And he happened to be in the audience. I didn't know he was even living here. And so he connected me with his dad. His dad came to visit, but we had dinner probably 4 months ago, my wife and I and Dean Link and the family. And he told me something. He said, you know, he was dean for Notre Dame at Notre Dame Law School for 25 years, and there were always like 4 or 5 students a year, as he put it, who deserved to be admitted but didn't qualify. And although my grades were good in college, my test scores were low, and he said, you were one of those students, and I had never known that. I mean, it was like an emotional, just an emotional roller coaster to think that he really gave me the opportunity to care for my sister. So I went and lived with her. And ironically, as fate would have it, the 2 little kids that she had at the time, who were probably 2 and 5, are both lawyers now. Now, maybe that's just happenstance that they would have gone to law school, but me studying on my finals and them coming to law school, how life has taken an interesting fashion now. So, and after I left Notre Dame, I had my life all planned. You know how we plan out exactly what we're going to do. And the good Lord said, that may be your plan, but we're not doing it that way. And so really my last semester at Notre Dame Law School, I was set to go back to my law firm in Phoenix, who I'd interned with. And I got there's a lawyer in Phoenix named Bill Jones who referred me, and he has a phenomenal story. He said, when you're back in Notre Dame, you should go see Mike Slive. He's a lawyer in Chicago, and you'll like him. He's in sports. So I called Mike Slive, drove up to Chicago on the weekend in my antiquated Toyota Corolla, you know, those ones had about like bicycle tires, and went and had breakfast with Mike. And by the time I got back to Notre Dame, he had left a message on my recorder, said that I'd like to offer you a job. He had never had an associate. And to get a chance to go work, it would be, if you were a musician, a pianist, it would be like Mozart saying that you could come work with him. And so I took the job with Mike Slive, had a great experience. Show you how careers come full circle. He then left a couple years later to start Conference USA and Great Midwest Conference, but then he went on to become the iconic commissioner of the SEC, who did the major television deal, who has benefited Mississippi State, where my son goes to school now. But that's a whole nother story. But I went to work with Mike Slive, and I always had the desire to be a sports agent. And so after a stop at Notre Dame as a law professor and administrator at Notre Dame, then I started my own sports agency with really no clients and very little money, and was able to grow that business to Will Shields, who's now in the Hall of Fame, was one of my early clients, Chris Zorge, who had a great story at Notre Dame, Lake Dawson, who's an NFL executive, and got into music and sports. And it was great because I got a chance to really learn and understand the mindset of a professional football player and how important it was. So I did that for 5 years, and then got a call of a friend who said, there's someone named Dick Vermeil who's coming out of retirement who I think you all would like each other. Went to see him in St. Louis, and he offered me a job, and I made sure all my players had new agents. Went to St. Louis, and we were 5-11, 4-12, and then third year into it, ended up winning the Super Bowl. Super Bowl 34, went 16-3, and then stayed another year in St. Louis, got a big job in Detroit, and after 2 years, they cleaned house. So I went back to the law firm that I had interned with, and a couple months there, got a call one day from Coach Denny Green here, and who had said that the Vikings may be for sale and it may be something to look at, and kind of the rest is history. Worked together, and work was involved in forming the group with Reggie Fowler, one of the original owners, and the Will family, and Landis family, and Mandelbaum family, and so we worked seriously to finalize the deal. And when the deal closed, Ziggy and Mark and Lenny Wolf said, hey, will you go to Minnesota for a couple weeks to help with the transition? And that was in July of 2005, and getting ready to start the 14th season. And I say this sincerely, was just in New York 3 days ago. Alan Landis, who was the first person I called. Thank God he took my call back in 2004, in October of 2004, but he just passed on last Saturday, and we were at the service on Tuesday. And I thanked his wife and his daughter and son for their dad being who he was, because he was the one in the first meeting said, you know who would like this deal? Ziggy would like this deal. And he was the one that really introduced us to the Wilfs, and that's how we're here today.
Well, you know, all these stories about your career and where it's built up, and I'm sure you have a ton of mentors. You mentioned Dick Vermeil. I've heard you talk about Dick Vermeil before, and people like that. But if you could pinpoint to maybe one or two people in your mind that our viewers would love to hear from, as far as you think were mentors that helped get you to this point, love to hear that.
Yeah, Dick Vermeil, quite naturally. I mean, it was cool. It's you know, I'm really an emotional person and really into memories and making sure you never forget, and for a lot of different reasons. But I actually ordered 2 seats from the old Georgia Dome, which is where we won the Super Bowl in January of 2000, before they imploded the Georgia Dome a couple months ago, and the Falcons opened up their new stadium, and I sent him the coach with a note just to thank him for the memories. And what he had meant to give me an opportunity, someone like me who didn't have any professional sports knowledge, or to hire me and to be basically the jet fuel for my career. So he just sent me a picture a couple of days ago with these 2 seats out on his porch, and he talked about how they shared a great glass of wine, and they just reminisced not only on his career, on his journey, and our relationship. So he has been someone who has been an unbelievable, you know, mentor. Definitely deserves to be in the Hall of Fame, and he's just a special person, and cares for people more certain days than they really even care for themselves. And I've just had so many from people in my family, but Georgia Frontiere, God rest her soul, who was the first woman owner in the NFL, was the owner while we were there together. And I mean, John Shaw, who was the former president of the Rams, Mike Slive, who I talked about. And I would even say, you know, I'm very blessed to have a relationship I do with the Wilf, you know, family. I know they own the team, and we have that respect for them, but they have really become true business partners, but friends, but a family that I look up to. Not only who's been successful from a business standpoint, but from a philanthropic standpoint, the way that they have raised their kids, how passionate they are, the way they really have leaned into this state. And so what I try to do, every person that I meet, including both of you, I try to take away something from each one of you that I can learn, that will go into my memory bank, that either I will talk about later one day in a speech, or one morning that I maybe need some inspiration that will, you know, inspire me. Some of the things we've talked about even, you know, off air, that I try to make sure every day I write down, you know, different things that I look back upon, and I think I'm a person that's really full of gratitude.
That's fantastic. Yeah. So the Viking organization just recently transitioned from Winter Park in Eden Prairie over to Eagan with the new Twin Cities Orthopedics practice facility. Your corporate headquarters are here. Having gone through that process when I was with the Twins and moving from the Metrodome to Target Field, I know what a monumental task that is. Can you tell us a little bit about what that process was like for the organization, and what the practice facility means for the Vikings?
It has. I always have high expectations of the impact of things that are done right and that are new, but I didn't really recognize how powerful this would be. I mean, we were in 5 different locations. You know, we had people at Winter Park, which is where my office was, and we were down at the 1010 building, which is where our preview center was. We had people at the U.S. Bank Stadium ticket office, and then we had people here who were building this, and then the blue building that is across the street from Winter Park was. And so, you know, now it just seems like I have so much more time, but you know, reflecting, I was spending so many minutes, you know, in the car, hours weekly, going downtown and driving, and we didn't have the space, so we would have to have our staff meetings at off-site locations of golf clubs and golf courses, and all the dinners and meetings and lunch. And now that we built this facility, it's spectacular. And it's not something that when you all come and look at it, you won't say, oh boy, this is, you know, over the top and this is too, you know, fancy. It really fits the backbone of Minnesota. You'll walk in there and say, you feel at home. This is a Minnesota building, but it has every amenity in there that you would need. And I think one of the things that you're going to see, which is great for this community, is our players are going to spend their off season here. And Kyle Rudolph even said it. He always trains in Newport Beach, you know, Southern California, leaves right after the season. He said, why do I need to go there? I can definitively say, because we went and looked at even facilities in the EPL. We were doing this in our spare time while we were opening up our stadium and hosting the Super Bowl and doing all the other things. But this is the best facility in the world, which is great. For it to be in the state of Minnesota and Eagan is absolutely phenomenal. So I can't wait till you get a chance to spend some time in it.
Well, I know the city of Eagan is in love with having the Vikings here, and it will do a lot for the economy as well as give them a higher profile just because the Minnesota Vikings are here in Eagan. On top of the practice facility that you built, 2 years before that, people maybe quickly forget that U.S. Bank Stadium is only 2 years old. So not only did you build this wonderful facility that houses your employees and the practice facility, but you've built this phenomenal arena that housed not only a Super Bowl, but other events besides the Vikings. Tell us about that experience for you. I mean, maybe you learned a lot from that that helped you with the practice facility, all the details. But I think it would be important to hear, do you believe now that if you've seen U.S. Bank Stadium after 2 years, do you think it is everything it was, or do you think you would do 100 different things?
No, I mean, it really, fortunately, back to the Will family, when you have owners that really trust their people, and I'm of the mindset, I measure 15 times and cut once. So we went and saw a lot of different stadiums, I write down a lot of different ideas, and we really did allow our spirit, our heart, our soul, our mind to get transferred on paper. And that was really important. A lot of people get in this projects are either they get anxious or they get weary or they get tired. We didn't do it. We made a vow to each other, and the team that we have with Steve Poppin and Steve LaCroix and Lester Bagley and Don Becker and the Will family and a lot of our other staff people, we promised each other that this would be a building that would last the next 20, 30, 40, 50 years. And so those days that we would get weary, that we promised each other from the beginning that we were going to lift each other up, because it was very important that we didn't leave anything unfinished, that we look back and said, like, you know what, we really, those couple months we did cut some corners here. We didn't do that. And so we did it the right way. So the design was unique. The structure is really unique. The sight lines are incredible. And you can tell all the thoughtful gestures. So even all the way down to the art, the way that it turned out really is spectacular. The other thing that was really important, we toured a lot. I've been to every stadium in the NFL and most other major league sports. But when we thought about it, there are a couple stadiums that their partners and their sponsorships they're too overwhelming. And you go in there, and that's one of the things we wanted to have it an elegant, clean building with very vibrant partners and sponsors. And so when you look at, the 3M and having quite naturally U.S. Bank and Ecolab and Pentair and Polaris and now TCO, but they're a partner in the stadium, and Sleep Number. I mean, these are great Minnesota, Anderson Windows. I mean, it goes on and on. These are great Minnesota companies that we have developed relationships with, from Thomson Reuters to Land O'Lakes. And so that's something that was really important to us, that we wanted to make sure that we developed the relationships, built it in a way that they would be proud to walk their customers into that building and to be able to say that we have a relationship with them. So it was a draining process, because even after when we were at the Capitol, I remember there that night, being late there tonight, and when we got approved, it was like, this just allows us to go get in the starting blocks to get ready to run the race. And because so many people are like, isn't this great? I said, yeah, it's great, but this is really where the work begins. And so we were able to really lean into it. And that's why we decided to go on and build our new home Twin Cities Orthopedics Performance Center, is we had everybody conditioned, from a construction and be able to work on very little sleep, that we said if we're going to do this, we might as well take the time and energy to fold right into it, which a lot of people are shocked, because they thought we were going to open up next year and have the Super Bowl in February. Then we're moving in our new building in March, but it's been special.
Sure has.
Kevin, the Vikings just signed Kirk Cousins to a huge contract. How does that affect the Vikings organization on the business side? Obviously there's a salary cap in the NFL, but it must have some ramifications in some form.
Yeah, and what we fortunately, all of our people in our organization, but especially our owners and senior leadership, look at this as a collaborative relationship. So anytime you're fortunate to be able to sign a player of the caliber of Kirk Cousins and the success he's had on the field, and to bring him into this environment, you know, it affords you an opportunity even from a business standpoint. You know, I always say the door swings both ways. That so things we do on the business side impacts football, things that football operation does impacts us, but the key thing is that we have to all be on the same page. And so we're excited, you know, ecstatic to have truly a franchise quarterback who really is a good person, which is just as important as was what happens on the field. And so it really, you know, fits into what we're doing here from a business perspective. But again, one of the things that's really important to me is, you know, brand is so important. And so we always are very strategic in the type of person. You know, Rick Spielman and Coach Zimber are really adamant about bringing in good football players who are good people, but who are good corporate citizens or who are going to work hard. And even for us, you know, every dollar is not a good dollar. We're not out trying to sell. We don't call them, you know, sponsors. I mean, we really look at all of our sponsors as partners and try to create a holistic environment and not only have, you know, vertical integration with them, but then also have horizontal integration. So having an opportunity for a player like Kirk and the other free agents and our draft picks and other players that we have, you know, Eric Kendricks received a new contract, but all of our players really trying to develop a team and a family that that once we can win a Super Bowl, that you can, you know, rattle off a couple in a row.
We're down to about 1 minute and 20 seconds or so in this episode. Kevin, the draft is coming up, and off air we talked a little bit about there is no off season,
yes.
In particular with your job and the organization. Anybody that works in sports, I think, would understand that, but people outside there may not know that. But you go from the schedule being announced yesterday, the NFL schedule and the Vikings schedule. Now you roll right into the draft. You have mini camps, free agency, and then training camp, etc. Right. I mean, it is exhausting in some ways, but also exhilarating in others because there's so much going on. And for you, the NFL has done such a great job with that.
They really have. I mean, that's the thing of it is, and so, but it also puts you in a position that your planning has to be critical. And, you know, we have to be very focused. Things that we're doing now, we talked about 2 years ago. And things that are happening now that we need to figure out how they're going to impact us in November and December of this year and next summer and 2 years down the road. So all of these dynamics, you know, ticket pricing to sponsorships to, I mean, you know, suite holders and partners and partnerships, all these different things we have to be aware of and focused on, you know, building the organization and staying ready. And so that's one of the good things of some of the experiences that I've had, and especially winning a Super Bowl, is that they're good learnings of say, okay, if we had to do this at the Rams, were we prepared from a business standpoint? What could we have done a little bit better? So one of the things our staff are so diligent, and you all have had a chance to know a lot of them, that we constantly talk about just being prepared and always just doing the right thing for the right reasons. And that's why part of this facility is so beautiful, is that we want to have an impact on the community.
Well, you've certainly done a great job.
Kevin, thank you so much for being with us today. We really appreciate you joining us on Behind the Game. It's been a pleasure.
Goes fast. I really enjoyed it. So
thank you.
Thank you for joining us on Behind the Game. We look forward to seeing you next month.